In 2018, 4,000 Google engineers did something no tech workers had ever done at that scale. They looked at what their company was building for the United States military, and they said no. They called it a moral victory, the press called it a turning point, and Google walked away. What nobody told you is what happened after, because the weapon Google refused to build didn't disappear. It got handed to someone else. It got better. And right now, as you watch this, it's running live in 4 countries. This is Project Maven, and the real story is nothing like what you've heard. It started with a headache the military couldn't solve. By 2017, American drones were filming everything: cities, compounds, roads, people moving through the desert at 3 in the morning. The cameras never stopped. The footage piled up faster than any team of humans could watch it. There were analysts, rooms full of them, whose entire job was to stare at drone footage hour after hour, flagging what mattered. But the math wasn't working. By the time an analyst spotted a target, the target had moved. By the time the report went up the chain, the window had closed. In April 2017, the Pentagon decided to fix that problem with artificial intelligence. They called the program the Algorithmic Warfare Cross-Functional Team. Inside the building, everyone called it Project Maven, and the idea on paper sounded almost boring. Train a machine to watch the footage, let it recognize objects, vehicles, weapons, people carrying weapons. Flag what matters. Let the humans decide what to do next. Simple, clean, defensible. That word, defensible, is going to matter. Now here's the part Google never wanted anyone to know. When the Pentagon started shopping this contract around in 2017, they didn't just want a vendor, they were running an audition. Because sitting behind Project Maven was something much bigger, a $10 billion cloud computing contract for the entire US military. And whoever proved themselves on Maven had a shot at winning it. Google wanted that contract badly enough that they structured the whole deal to stay hidden. They didn't sign directly with the Pentagon. They came in through a subcontractor, a defense firm called ECS Federal. The arrangement was deliberate. There were internal agreements preventing either side from putting out press releases. The whole thing was designed to keep Google's name out of the news. When employees later asked what the contract was worth, Google's CEO told them $9 million. Small, manageable, a research project essentially. Internal emails showed the real number was closer to $30 million. And the projections for the following years were in the hundreds of millions. Maven wasn't a research project. It was a foot in the door, the biggest door in the world, and it worked. Right up until the moment someone leaked it. March 2018. A journalist publishes an internal Google document. The company has been secretly building AI for Pentagon drone surveillance. Employees had no idea. Inside Google, the reaction wasn't anger. It was something closer to dread. Because buried in the story was an email written by one of Google's most respected AI researchers, Dr. Fei Li. She had written it privately, around the time the contract was signed. The message was a warning to her team. Avoid at all costs any mention of AI. Weaponized AI, she wrote, was the most sensitized topic in the field. She was afraid of what would happen if the press found out. Later, publicly, she told the New York Times she would never support weaponizing AI, that it was deeply against her principles. Both things couldn't be true. Now 4,000 people inside Google could see both of them at the same time. Within days of the story breaking, a document started circulating inside Google, a petition, addressed directly to the CEO, Sundar Pichai. The opening line, "We believe Google should not be in the business of war." 100 signatures overnight, then 1,000, then over 3,000. Engineers, researchers, product managers, people who had joined Google because they believed in what the company stood for. Don't be evil. They had heard that phrase since their first interview. They had believed it. Now they were being asked to believe that flagging human targets in drone footage wasn't evil. It was just image recognition. Some of them quit. Not transferred, not took leave, resigned. One wrote, "At some point I realized I could not in good faith recommend anyone join Google knowing what I knew." Another, "The strongest statement I could make was to leave." This is where most people get the story wrong. The engineers weren't being naive. They weren't anti-military. They were asking a very specific question. One that nobody in leadership wanted to answer out loud. If your system identifies a person carrying a weapon in drone footage, what happens to that person next? Who decides? How fast? And when the machine is wrong, because sometimes it will be wrong, who is responsible? Google's leadership never answered that question. They repeated what the contract said. The system is for non-offensive use only. Humans are always in the loop. But one of the Pentagon's own officials had already said something different in public. He told a defense conference that people and computers would work together to increase the ability of weapon systems to detect objects. Weapon systems. The engineers had read that quote. That's part of why they were scared. In June 2018, Google announced it would not renew the contract. Sundar Pichai published a new set of AI principles, 7 commitments, 4 prohibitions. Among them, Google would not build weapons or technologies whose principal purpose was to cause injury to people. Somewhere along the way, quietly, without announcement, the phrase "don't be evil" disappeared from Google's code of conduct. There was one last mention of it, buried in the final line, but the preface was gone. The protesters celebrated. Ethicists wrote about it. It became the model for what was possible when tech workers pushed back. And then something happened that almost nobody covered. By late 2019, Palantir had quietly taken over everything Google walked away from. They called it the Maven Smart System. And they didn't rebuild what Google had built. They went further. Instead of analyzing drone footage, the new system fused more than 150 separate intelligence sources into a single interface. Satellite imagery, radar, infrared, signals intelligence, social media, all of it feeding into one place. It didn't flag objects anymore. It generated targeting recommendations, complete, ranked, ready to act on. The contracts that followed were unlike anything in the history of defense technology. Hundreds of millions at first, then billions, then the largest single deal in Palantir's history, a $10 billion, 10-year agreement with the United States Army. Their stock rode Maven into the S&P 500. The director of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency said it publicly, 1,000 targeting recommendations every hour, not per day, per hour. That's not analysis anymore, that's a production line. And here's what a production line actually looks like in practice. A person sits in front of a screen. The list updates faster than they can work through it. Each name, each coordinate, each flagged individual gets maybe 20 seconds of human attention before the next one appears. One officer who worked inside a similar system described it exactly that way. 20 seconds, dozens per day. He said he had zero added value as a human, apart from being a stamp of approval. That is what the engineers were afraid of in 2018, not the technology in theory, this in practice. Here's what the coverage of the Google revolt almost universally missed. When Google walked away, the Pentagon learned a lesson. Never again build your most sensitive systems on infrastructure controlled by a company that can be pressured by its own workforce. Never again let a company with a consumer brand, a public image, and 4,000 idealistic engineers have access to your most classified programs. So they built an alternative ecosystem, Palantir, Anduril, a network of defense-first technology companies with no consumer products to protect, no employee petitions to manage, no public whose trust they needed to maintain. Companies whose entire identity was built around exactly the work Google had refused. The engineers who protested didn't kill the program, they created the market for its replacement, one specifically engineered to never face the same pressure again. That is the hidden advantage the defense industry extracted from the 2018 revolt. Not just the technology, the lesson about how to protect the technology from the next protest. Nobody was coming to save them this time. There was no company left to petition. In February 2025, Google published a new version of its AI principles. The section listing what Google would never build. No weapons, no surveillance tools that violated human rights, no technologies that could cause injury, was gone, deleted entirely, replaced with language about global competition and geopolitical leadership. A former Google ethical AI lead said it plainly, the last bastion is gone. Google is now a co-prime contractor on the Pentagon's cloud infrastructure. They have an entire division dedicated to Department of Defense work. The pledge that 4,000 engineers risked their careers to extract lasted exactly 7 years. And somewhere in a military operations center right now, a screen is showing a list of recommended targets. The list is updating in real time. A person is working through it as fast as they can. The machine generates faster than the human can review. Nobody has answered the engineer's question. When the machine is wrong, and sometimes it will be wrong, who is responsible? The engineers in 2018 were right about everything except the outcome. They saw where this was going. They understood what it would become. They forced one of the most powerful companies in the world to stop building it. And the machine kept running. That's the part nobody wants to sit with. Not that Google broke its promise, though it did. Not that Palantir got rich, though it did. It's that the people who understood the danger most clearly, who sacrificed real careers over it, who were correct about every consequence they warned about, They couldn't stop it. They just couldn't be blamed for it anymore. If that pattern sounds familiar, it should. Subscribe, because it doesn't end with drones.